Gerald Monroe had worked at Hartwell and Associates for 22 years, and in all that time, no one had ever seen him raise his voice, complain about overtime, or leave a single task unfinished. He arrived every morning at 7:45, 15 minutes before anyone else, brewed the office coffee, and quietly settled into his corner. Desk near the window where the afternoon light fell golden on the stacks of files. He managed with careful, unhurried hands. He was the kind of man people stopped noticing after a while, not because he was invisible, but because he had become as constant and reliable as the walls themselves. The younger employees called him Uncle Gerald behind his back, not unkindly, just the way you'd describe furniture. That had always been there and always would be. His boss, Richard Caldwell, was a sharp, results-driven man who ran the office with efficiency and a mild impatience for anything that slowed momentum. He respected Gerald in the distant way people respect alarm clocks. Useful, necessary, but rarely thought about beyond their function. On an ordinary Tuesday in late November, Richard was walking through the main hall when he paused, beside the long wall where the company had hung. Framed photographs over the years, team photos from retreats, milestone anniversaries, ribbon-cutting ceremonies at the new branch. He glanced at them occasionally, but never really looked. That afternoon, however, Gerald was standing before the wall with his hands clasped behind his back, very still, staring at one photograph in particular. Richard almost walked past, but something about the stillness stopped him. He looked at Gerald, then looked at the photo. It was an old one from 14 years ago, a company charity drive, where employees had volunteered at a flood relief shelter. Dozens of people smiled at the camera, holding supply boxes, wearing matching vests. Gerald was in the far corner of the image, barely noticeable, crouching down beside a small boy who had clearly been crying. Gerald's hand was on the boy's shoulder, and the boy's face, mid-photograph, was caught in the exact moment of shifting from tears to something softer, almost a smile. Richard studied the photo for a moment, then looked at Gerald. Gerald glanced over, noticed his boss, and gave his usual quiet nod as if nothing remarkable was happening. Richard asked, without quite planning to, "Is that boy someone you knew?" Gerald looked back at the photograph and said simply, "No, sir. I'd never met him before that day. His family had lost everything in the flooding. He hadn't eaten properly in 2 days. I sat with him while the volunteers sorted the supplies. I just talked to him for a while, told him silly stories, made him laugh a little, gave him my lunch." Richard waited, sensing there was more. Gerald continued, "I never saw him again after that day. But last week I received a letter at the front desk addressed to the company, asking if anyone knew how to reach a man named Gerald who volunteered there 14 years ago. Turns out that boy is 20 years old, now and studying to become a disaster relief coordinator. He tracked down this company because he remembered the vest." Richard stared at him. The hallway had gone very quiet. 2 younger colleagues had stopped pretending to look at their phones. Gerald reached into his breast pocket and unfolded a letter, worn soft at the creases as if it had been read many times. He didn't hand it over. He just held it for a moment, then folded it back and tucked it away. Richard found his voice and asked him slowly, the question that had been forming without his realizing it. "Gerald, in 22 years, how many times have you done something like this and never told anyone?" Gerald looked genuinely surprised by the question, as if it had never occurred to him that doing good was something one kept score of. He thought for a moment, tilted his head slightly and said, "I wouldn't know, sir. I never counted." Richard stood there unable to speak. Not because the answer was dramatic or rehearsed, but because it was so completely simply true. There was no performance in it, no hidden wish for recognition, just a man who had spent a quiet lifetime doing what he believed was right and then going back to his desk. That evening, before leaving, Richard walked to Gerald's desk and said nothing. He just placed his hand briefly on the older man's shoulder, the same way Gerald had done for that crying little boy in the photograph, and Gerald looked up and understood. Some lessons don't need long speeches. Some people change you not with grand gestures, but with the quiet, steady way they move through the world, leaving it softer wherever they go. If this story moved something in you, share it with someone who needs a reminder that kindness is never wasted, even when no one is watching. Like, share, and subscribe to Kindness Corner Stories, because every story here is a gentle reminder. that the world is still full of good people.